The F3F-3 was the peak of a dead end. As the last biplane fighter ordered by the United States Navy, it represented the final refinement of an obsolete geometry. While often dismissed as a colorful pre-war relic, its hand-cranked retractable landing gear and high-stress fuselage were crucial engineering precursors to the F4F Wildcat. This design was the ultimate paradox, maximizing low-speed lift while hitting the inevitable brick wall of biplane drag. Physics dictates that two wings offer massive lift but catastrophic drag. The F3F-3 utilized the R1820 engine to muscle through intense parasitic drag. Its 18 pounds per square foot wing loading allowed for incredibly short takeoff rolls, essential for the tiny flight decks of the 1930s. However, the structural complexity of interplane struts and flying wires created a performance ceiling that no amount of horsepower could shatter. It was a masterpiece of structural rigidity over aerodynamic purity. By the 1940 fleet problems, the F3F-3's role was clear: a high-stress classroom for a new generation of naval aviators. Its rugged airframe survived the brutal G-loads of carrier traps, cementing Grumman's reputation as the Iron Works. While it never saw combat, it validated the landing gear geometry and fuselage volume that would soon define the Pacific Air War. It was the high watermark of the biplane era, the last breath of grace before the cold efficiency of the monoplane took over. The Brewster F2A1 was not born a failure, but a revolutionary paradigm shift that the Navy's industrial logic wasn't ready to handle. As the first monoplane fighter to enter carrier service, it promised to bridge the gap between biplane agility and modern velocity. Popular history labels the Buffalo a death trap, yet in its original 1939 configuration, it was light, fast, and highly praised by test pilots. The true disaster began when the Navy demanded additional armor and fuel, additions the airframe was never stressed to carry. This mismatch created a fatal structural compromise. Engineering is the management of energy, and the F2A1 failed to manage the energy of landing. By increasing wing loading to 24.1 pounds per square foot, Brewster achieved the 300 miles per hour milestone, but at a cost. To minimize parasitic drag, the designers utilized a complex, narrow-track landing gear that retracted into the fuselage belly. While aerodynamically clean, this mechanism was structurally brittle. On the heaving deck of an aircraft carrier, the gear frequently collapsed under the vertical G-loads of a standard trap, proving that speed means nothing if the airframe cannot survive the impact loading. The Buffalo's operational life in the United States Navy was a short, sharp lesson in weight growth. By 1942, the F2A was bloated, overweight, and outclassed. However, its failure was the precise catalyst for the Navy's future success. It forced the Bureau of Aeronautics to realize that a carrier plane is first a hook and only second a fighter. This rejection cleared the path for the F4F Wildcat to seize the front line. The F2A1 remains the ultimate pivot, a necessary evolutionary failure that defined the survival standards for every naval aircraft that followed. The F4U was a monster of torque and geometry, designed around the massive R2800 engine. Its silhouette sacrificed visibility for raw, unadulterated speed. While Hollywood portrays the Corsair as a carrier-born hero from day one, the United States Navy officially deemed it unfit for shipboard operations in 1942. Its lethal tendency to bounce and the total blindness caused by its 14-foot nose made it a liability. This was the ultimate trade-off, achieving the fastest fighter in the world while creating an engineering nightmare for the landing signal officer. Pushing the wing loading to 32.7 pounds per square foot gave the Corsair its terrifying intercept speed, but it turned the low-speed approach into a game of Russian roulette. The inverted gull wing was an ingenious solution to provide clearance for the massive 13-foot propeller without lengthening the landing gear. However, it introduced a vicious asymmetric stall. When slow and dirty, the left wing would drop without warning due to the engine's immense torque, leading to a rollover crash on the deck. It was a machine operating at the absolute physical limit of airframe stability. The F4U-1's early operational record was defined by exile. Rejected by the carrier fleet, it was handed to the Marine Corps on Guadalcanal to operate from primitive dirt strips. It took the British Royal Navy's radical curving approach technique to finally domesticate this beast for the deck. The early Corsair stands as a failure of initial carrier integration, a high-velocity warning that in naval aviation, power is useless if you cannot see the wires. It remains the bent-wing Widowmaker, a machine that had to be broken before it could lead. The F4F-4 was the industrial pivot that transformed the carrier air wing from a boutique force into a mass-production weapon. It served as the crucial bridge between the biplane era and the heavy iron of the Hellcat. Many claim the F4F-4 was an upgrade over the F4F-3, but pilots initially hated it. The addition of 2 extra guns and the stow-wing folding mechanism added massive weight without increasing power. The Navy sacrificed climb rate and agility to double the number of fighters a single deck could carry. Engineering a folding wing is a battle against structural entropy. The Leroy Grumman designed stow wing added over 300 pounds of hinges and hydraulics, pushing the wing loading to 30.7 pounds per square foot. While it increased parasitic drag, it allowed the Wildcat to be packed tightly, like sardines in the hangar. More importantly, the internal structure was over-engineered to absorb Japanese 20mm cannon fire. The F4F-4 wasn't designed to outturn the enemy. It was a high-tensile steel box designed to survive a paradigm shift in naval attrition. At the Battle of Midway, the F4F-4's engineering logic was vindicated. While the Zero was aerodynamically superior, it was structurally fragile. The Wildcat's ability to absorb punishment and return to the deck allowed the Navy to maintain pilot continuity, the most critical resource in a war of attrition. The F4F-4 proved that in carrier warfare, a good enough fighter in great numbers is superior to a perfect fighter in few. It was the bridge that held the line, providing the rugged DNA that would eventually be perfected in the Hellcat. The F6F3 Hellcat was not a stroke of luck. It was the final, brutal answer to the carrier deck paradox. While the Corsair struggled with its geometry, Grumman perfected a design that merged massive horsepower with forgiving handling. The Hellcat is often simplified as a bigger Wildcat, but it was an entirely clean sheet design focused on one metric: the pilot's survival during the most dangerous 30 seconds of flight, the landing. It resolved the high-speed intercept versus low-speed stall paradox that had plagued naval aviation for a decade. The Hellcat's secret lay in its massive 334-square-foot wing, the largest of any single-engine fighter in the war. This enormous surface area allowed the F6F3 to maintain a low wing loading relative to its weight, resulting in a stall speed so low that even a novice pilot could stick a deck landing. To combat the resulting parasitic drag, Grumman utilized the 2,000-horsepower R2800 engine not for pure speed, but as a brute force lever to sustain high-energy maneuvers. It was a masterpiece of kinetic management, trading sleekness for raw, recoverable stability. The 1944 Great Marianas Turkey Shoot was the final exam for the Hellcat's engineering logic. It wasn't just about shooting down Zeros, it was about the airframe's ability to return to the deck, refuel, and rearm under intense operational tempo. With a staggering 19-to-1 kill ratio, the F6F3 proved that a rugged, stable platform is the ultimate force multiplier. It marks the pinnacle of the piston engine era, a weapon so well integrated into the carrier environment that it rendered its competition obsolete by sheer reliability. It was the iron works at its most lethal.